Hello gentlemen, I am Witold and this is the new Ducati Multistrada V4 along with V4S and V4S Sport versions. The same bike, different trims and equipment. It was presented by Ducati in 2020 and you can have yours delivered in 2021 already. And there are some differences between the V4 and V4S that you need to know about from the beginning. And it's not just an added letter that stands for different colors or let's say 1 horsepower more, which it doesn't. Now this means quite different equipment and so in effect a less or a more technologically advanced motorcycle. This makes a difference, and these are actually not just gadgets that the V4S offers, but truly useful and also fun things like adaptive front LED light, having GPS map displayed on the screen, semi-active suspension which makes a difference, a quick shifter that can make a very big difference in everyday riding. There's also Start assist that is in the V4S and keyless ignition. And Ducati also claim that they equipped the V4S with enhanced brakes, and this idea I do not necessarily like, because it's pretty much saying that if we buy a Ducati Multistrada V4, we don't just a V4, we don't get good brakes, but if we pay more, if we pay extra for the essentially same bike, the V4S, we now can be safe as we get better or enhanced brakes, improved brakes maybe even. Now this is not what I would like to see really, and this one I have to complain about, and I'm keeping it totally fair to you guys as my fellow motorcyclists. I love you all and I wish you only the best moments on your bikes, so I want you to be aware of what you are getting. Anyway, in the end, in my opinion, these are all things worth paying for, and if you're deciding which variant to get now, I strongly encourage you to go for V4S, and that's what I would do myself. Spending so much money on a motorcycle, it would be a pity to have it lacking some of these features. Then there is the V4S Sport version, which is having an Akrapovic exhaust, carbon additions, some different colors and different rims. So now that you know what we are talking about, let's move to the 10 important things and news about this new Multistrada V4, as there's a lot of crazy features and really big changes comparing to the previous 1260 Multistrada. This is not just a facelift, this is a new motorcycle with a different engine than before in Multistrada. So let's go and pay attention. This may actually kick the BMW GS's ass in many more fields than before, and this is pretty exciting. I will start off with the fact that Multistrada can now have a radar which sees up to 160 meters ahead, and that actually sits between the front lights, and thanks to it the bike gets adaptive cruise control that works up to 160 kilometers, and also there is another radar in the rear this time that allows you to use blind spot detection system, a system with a light in the bike's mirrors, just like in the car. So you've got actually to pay for these new systems extra though. And other cool tech in this bike is a digital screen, and watch this, because with a regular cheap Multistrada V4 you get a 5-inch display, while if you choose the more expensive Multistrada V4S version, then you get a bigger 6.5-inch display. It's just like in cars nowadays, I see. And soon all the bikes will have the exact same technology, and maybe will even look the same, and each of them will differ only by having more and more screens, and those screens being larger. And I'm not saying that this is bad, but it's definitely a change in the motorcycle market that we haven't seen really before, and I mean between 2010 and 2020. These things are very nice upgrades, and having cornering ABS in this Multistrada that works successfully also in corners, having wheelie control, traction control, assistance when starting off uphill, keyless start for which you also have to pay additionally, and also an adaptive front light which will really or may really help you see better in corners when you ride, if you ride after dark. So having these can be a blessing for many of us guys, and I do like that. So I'm happy that Ducati gives us a possibility of having these, and every single one of us must understand that this is how manufacturers earn with those upgrades that we have to, and in the end we want to pay for. And well, this is, I think, fair. If you want it, you can have it. You also will need to upgrade to V4S version in order to get a semi-active suspension called by Ducati Skyhook. Sounds very good. As Ducati said on their website, let me quote this: 4 riding modes, 4 load modes, and over 400 parameter combinations for semi-active suspension that allow you to have exactly the bike you want whenever you want. And I say to this, good luck having it the way you want it, whenever you want it, with those 400 combinations, really. And of course, thankfully, there are presets, and that's good news for all of us. There is a quick shifter too, which means that you may change gears up and down without using clutch in certain situations, and this is in the V4S version. So again, make sure what you want from the bike and then choose a version based on that. There's one more thing there in the V4S, and it's the world's first wave control. And let me briefly explain what that means. It's kind of connected with traction control, and it cuts power in certain situations. Just here, it does it very gently and responds to bike falling into unpleasant and potentially dangerous vibrations and wave. It's where the rear part of the bike starts to wiggle and wave. It makes a difference because it's not the handlebar getting wobbly, but it's whatever happens in the second part of the bike. So behind the front wheel, behind the handlebar. And usually this happens because of some parts being worn out, something being damaged, or tire and tire pressure problems. This is the first time a system like this has found its spot in a motorcycle, and it's supposed to help. And you may call it literally stability control. And this kind of behavior may happen especially to heavier motorcycles at higher speeds, especially when you put on some luggage. So Multistrada ticks all the boxes here. It's potentially, or it can potentially be vulnerable to this. Now, this is here to help us prevent all that. It looks like nobody else in the industry has it, and Ducati is there first. Thank you, Ducati, good job. Let's move to power and performance. The new Multistrada has a V4 engine, so 4 cylinders in a Victoria setup with crazy in this class, 170 horsepower. Imagine how many cars there are that have less than 170 horsepower. And we are talking about a light motorcycle. This is crazy. This is still less than Panigale V4 or even a Street Fighter V4, Ducati Street Fighter. However, it's currently the most powerful adventure motorcycle. Before it was KTM 1290 Super Adventure with its 160 horsepower. It's even more than a not really so much adventure-oriented BMW S1000 XR with its 165 horsepower coming from an inline-4 engine. And I do know that it's not a race with those bikes, but also look, there's a reason manufacturers put so much power into them. So it must be the market's demand. People would want that. I would want that myself. Now guys, it is Multistrada V4 in terms of power, having the most, the biggest, and the largest, and the longest, and so on. Good job, Ducati, you beat everyone, and I hope that the BMW GS fanboys will not be crying now, because, and there is a justification to that, because it's still BMW R1250 GS that produces the most torque, and precisely it is 143 Newton meters. And let's compare it to Multistrada, which the V4 now, which has 125 Newton meters. So it's actually less than the regular, or rather the previous or outgoing Multistrada 1260 that had, mind you, 130 Newton meters. And the funny thing is that the same engine, the V4 engine in the new Multistrada V4, just differently tuned, generates mind-blowing 208 horsepower in the Street Fighter V4 and staggering 214 horsepower in Panigale V4. That's 38 and 44 horsepower more accordingly in the same engine. And I do wonder why they decided to detune the Multistrada so much now. Maybe they will be raising it partially if competitors come closer to them, like BMW builds, for example, the new S1000 XR with 172 or 175 horsepower. And next week, Multistrada can be there with 180 horsepower easily, just with the software change. Really smart potential strategy. Well done, Ducati, again. Like in a Tesla, kind of. Every week you can get a little bit more power. Every year you can get 30 horsepower more. As for the tuning, actually the same has been done by BMW with this S1000 XR that I'm referring to, as you see sometimes. However, they've started all that detuning with a naked bike first, the S1000R. Not an XR, but an R, the naked bike, which got the same 1-liter engine, which was already detuned a lot in comparison with BMW Superbike. Now, Ducati did not exactly detune their naked bike as much as BMW did. Ducati Street Fighter V4 has just 6 horsepower less than the Panigale V4. Now, the power curve is much different in mentioned Ducati bikes, and Multistrada delivers more power at lower range, and I believe that this is the reason that they had to cut the power in the top range much more. And this gives us more flexibility in the end in Multistrada, which means more power and more torque in the mid-range comparing to these other Ducati sports bikes. It's a different approach, and maybe they really left that field for some future, maybe even software updates like I mentioned in Tesla cars. Every year you get 5 horsepower more, or, it just crossed my mind now, or if you pay, you may unlock a new challenge of new power pack of, let's say, 10 horsepower for additional 5,000 euros or $5,000. And also, while we are at this point, it's not exactly connected, but it's good to know that the fuel tank capacity of this new Multistrada V4 is exactly 22 liters. Now, the third point is that sound is different now, and I'm not convinced about this part, but there are some benefits to switching from 2-cylinder engine like it was before to a 4-cylinder engine, like for example smoothness. It's slightly more user-friendly than those harsh and brutal V-twins in general. They are not necessarily harsh and brutal, but their characteristics are more into that direction. But I would say that these 4-cylinder engines do not sound as good on the other hand, and that's a disadvantage here. Fourth point will be me separately drawing your attention to this new version having more power but less torque comparing to the previous one. It's just 5 Nm less, and it may not be that noticeable, but it shows that we are going in the way of reaching higher RPM power, not necessarily a low range torque, which is the opposite approach to what BMW does with the biggest GS, with the R1200 and the R1250 GS. And that one is a torque monster. And keep that in mind, as this makes a big difference. Thanks to all that power, Ducati Multistrada V4 is definitely and visibly quicker than the GS. But in order to get a sudden acceleration to overtake, you may need to drop a few gears in a Multistrada for its engine to be able to work at higher RPM and have access to all that additional power being higher in the range, because the power is set higher, so you need to rev it more. In the GS you don't have to do that. There's less power, but there's more torque and it's lower. It will start going more quickly. However, if you want to race, Multistrada will be winning because you'll be able to keep it at high revs at all the time. Now, fifth point may surprise you, as it's a rear cylinders deactivation system. And thanks to having 2 more cylinders now in this new engine, and in order for you not to burn your bottom when waiting for a light change, 2 rear cylinders that are in the back, they may stop working while you are stopped at a traffic light. And also to save fuel, by the way. What you need to know is that you cannot control that, yet those switches between using all 4 cylinders and just the front 2, they should be completely unnoticeable. So you don't have to worry. I find it actually pretty smart, and knowing this system from cars from many years ago, it just works and you won't even notice it. So anyway, I find it pretty smart, and thank you Ducati, and especially young guys like perhaps maybe still myself should thank Ducati for that, if you know what I mean. But let's move to the 6th point, and the chassis and suspension differences. This optional skyhook suspension in the V4S allows you to use its auto leveling function, so keeping the bike flat regardless of load, and it can work on its own, or you may set it yourself if you are riding alone, if you are riding with a passenger, or if you're riding with luggage and so on. And those 400 settings combinations, they do scare me, but in fact it's better to have possibilities to set your default settings rather than not having those options. It's simple. If you don't want to play with 400 combinations, you don't have to. Now, another thing is, and this is a great part, ground clearance is now 22 centimeters, which is a lot. It could be a really big point for this new bike. Let me tell you that BMW R1250 GS has 18.5 centimeters, while the previous Multistrada 1260 had just 16.8 centimeters. This is over 5 centimeters, this much, of ground clearance more model year to model year. 2020 1260 Multistrada versus 2021 Multistrada V4. And look, the Enduro version of Multistrada 1260 had 20.5 centimeters before. Only a BMW R1250 GS Adventure has also exactly 22 centimeters of ground clearance. And I must say that this starts looking like Ducati is getting all of the things just right, or even much better than expected. And this is also the moment when I start wondering what future response of BMW will be, as all these things will, or this may be actually very hard to beat that Ducati introduced. And the funny thing is that there's no more single swing arm that we have all been getting used to so much and that looks so great in the outgoing Multistrada 1260. And only the 1260 Enduro with more ground clearance and more wheel travel had conventional double-sided swing arm. This is a change here, and it's also a visually a big change. And what's also a change is the height of the seat, which is adjustable between 84 and 86 centimeters in this new one. Previously, in 1260, it was 82.5 and 84.5 centimeters. So now it is taller by default, but still there are lowered seats if you want one, and this way there's no big deal here, I guess. There is a higher one too if you are on this side of the scale. Now the 7th point, and design changes. And because of giving the bike an entirely different engine, it has started to look differently too. Actually a bit heavy, I would say. It kind of reminds me of a good old Honda Varadero, if you remember that bike. Awesome bike, beautiful sound. A direct competitor to Suzuki V-Strom 1000. Also, this new Multistrada V4 reminds me of the current Honda Africa Twin in terms of its shape, because now it looks less slim than the previous Multistrada, and it also looks taller thanks to that more ground clearance and also different proportions because of all that. And I gotta say that in terms of front lights, after turning them on, I actually like them less than I did like the lights of 1260. And all in all, I like the 1260, I think, more, but still, guys, it's a matter of taste. As you know, it's a matter of what you personally like and what appears better in front of your eyes. And what I can tell you here is that at the first sight, it will look to you just like every other generation of Multistrada, starting from all the way from 2010. And I think that this is a good thing, since the bike has always been quite pretty, in my opinion, again, of course. And also, this new one, this is not really an important information, but this new one spent some time in a wind tunnel, having its fairings and windshield designed properly. So it's now supposed to be really effective. It's to give you very quiet experience, even at high speeds. I mean, wind protection. The windshield is height adjustable manually. It's worth to know that. And take a look at that beautiful Italian flag on the fuel tank. And I personally really like these kinds of things. They are very, very cool in my opinion. Now, maintenance. This is the 8th point. Every 15,000 kilometers there is an oil change, and there is a 60,000 kilometer interval in valve clearance check. And this is impressive. That's a really large interval. And this is thanks to getting rid of the previously famous desmodromic system. It is now easier and cheaper to service this engine. And here in terms of maintenance comes one thing that is often a killer for Ducati and other manufacturers too, if they just try to compare themselves to BMW GS, the big one, the R1200 or 1250 GS. The GS is propelled by a drive shaft, while even the new Multistrada V4 still uses chain drive. And here we go again with having to make stops and spray, and with all the nasty and gross stuff flying around the rear part of the bike because of the chain, with also having to replace it every 20 or 30,000 kilometers, and you have to take care of the sprockets and so on and so on, and even thinking about this whole thing in the first place. In BMW, there is nothing there is nothing to bother yourselves with in the first place. And it's worth to keep that in mind when considering these brands, I think. This can be a very important thing if you are keen on traveling for long distances and you are tight on space, you don't want to keep that bottle, that spray or lubricant with you and so on and so on. But yes, there are devices that allow you to have the lubrication process automated, and all you need to do is add specific oil to some kind of an additional reservoir which you have to hide somewhere under the seat or next to the bike's fairing. It makes everything even more dirty and nasty down there, but the chain is handled for a few thousand kilometers just like that. Ninth point is about the engine now being an element of a frame and not a part that the frame is just holding. And this changes the way the bike looks and may also enhance stiffness of the whole construction, of the whole frame, of the whole body of the bike. And that's a good thing. Now, if you look at how the V4 looks from the side and now look at 1260, you will see the new aluminum frame being there instead of the steel frame as it was previously. But most importantly, this may actually be an important and beneficial thing. It is supposed to lower the weight of the new Multistrada V4, this construction, by 4 kilograms, comparing to steel frame construction. Now, engine being a compact, small V4, it gave Ducati a possibility to place it in a better place and move the center of gravity to a slightly better spot, according to Ducati. The engine is also supposed to be 1.5 kilograms lighter than the mighty V2 that is now gone from Multistrada. Now, wait for this, because the bike weighs 217 kilograms without fluids, so dry. So with 90% of its 22-liter fuel tank and let's say 5 kilograms of other fluids, which is around 242 kilograms wet, which is not that bad on its own. However, interestingly enough, it is now around 10 kilograms heavier than the previous Multistrada 1260. So much for all that pushing and weight savings, right? And at the same time, it's only around 7 kilograms lighter than BMW GS with its drive shaft there and with the weight of 249 kilograms of wet weight. So also measured in the same way. On the other hand, shifting the engine's position is what allowed to increase the ground clearance so much while still keeping the center of gravity lower than before, according to Ducati. And to explain this more weight issue, first of all, obviously, 4 cylinders instead of 2 cylinders need more equipment because some of the things need to be doubled. Then the capacity of the fuel tank is now 2 liters more, and we have to calculate that when we're talking about the wet weight. Also, exhaust is heavier due to more and more crazy emissions regulations, and there are more and more wires. I guess you haven't thought about it because I haven't thought about that either, but there are more and more wires which actually do carry some weight, and in the end there you have your extra 10 kilograms. Still, it's an interesting situation, I must say, because it's quite significant weight gain, but I still expect this Multistrada to handle even better than the 1260, which was already very close to BMW R1250 GS. Now, moving to the 10th point and to the new display that actually looks so much better than the one in 1260 and also the 1200, which is absolutely terrible in my opinion. I know some of you don't agree and you handle it very good. I'm happy for you guys, but to me it was not the best experience. The menus that are still further there, they seem to be just as complicated, a little bit less complicated, especially comparing to the older ones. But at least the default screen that we look at all the time is now much more clear in terms of information that it shows. It's a very good move by Ducati, I believe. And especially that it can now have an analog rev counter displayed. So it's not actually analog, but it looks like it's analog. And I love that. I think this is going to be the perfect solution. Having the analog gauge cluster displayed on a screen. Screen is cheaper to design, and you can place those screens in all the bikes across the whole range. I would not imagine not having or not seeing this needle going up and down and around and around. Now, still, switches on the handlebar are having backlight, so you can easily see what you are working with even after dark, which I know some of you really like. And another cool thing in regard to the bigger display in the V4S version is that you can adjust the angle of the screen according to your height. So you can play with it like this to see better. Well, I gotta say, wow, I am really impressed by this. Those small but useful things make the whole package really complete and awesome, and I like that. And another fun and extremely useful thing is that you can have your map, a GPS map, cloned there on the screen, since you can connect your phone and see what is going on while riding, what's going on your phone while you're riding. You need to take your phone out, you just see it on the bike's display if you connect. And this, I must give Ducati a lot of kind words for, as it's simply awesome in my opinion. They go forward, they are not afraid to try new things and to try to kick their competition's asses and still go with unconventional and new things. These Ducati bikes, all of them actually, are becoming really advanced motorcycles across the whole model range. And I still remember when I rode the Multistrada 1200 before its facelift, and perhaps at that time it was the worst behaving bike that I have ever ridden in terms of handling and cornering. It totally didn't want to turn, and I'm not exaggerating and not kidding here. I had a city ride on it. It was not a very pleasant experience. I actually had a Ducati salesman riding behind me. He was on a big Ducati Monster riding, following me. That Ducati Monster, it wouldn't want to start in the beginning for a few minutes, literally for a few minutes. It's funny now that I'm recalling this, and it's also a bit of a shame for Ducati, both with the malfunction of that monster and also with the way that first Multistrada 1200 was behaving. However, the 1200, after the facelift, with many changes, had become awesome, really awesome, and I really enjoyed riding that bike. And it wasn't giving as much confidence as a BMW GS, the big GS. Its build quality wasn't as good comparing to BMW, but comparing its ride to the previous version of the Multistrada, it was fantastic. It was a crazy upgrade. So Ducati, they really learned their lessons. Now with Ducati's progress, this V4 may be a killer in this segment potentially. There is an 11th point that I'm pretty sure may impress you guys as much as it impressed me. Because since Ducati clearly listens to us, and they know how weird the menu system in these bikes is, or at least as it used to be, and people were complaining about this, now they have enhanced its design. But right now, on their website, you may basically ride a Multistrada from your desk and test the whole menu, the whole onboard computer system. They have uploaded a Multistrada's brain, and they have created a simulator of the menu with all the buttons, with a current time according to your time zone, with that time displayed, and we can test all the functions even before we actually sit on a bike. And I am super impressed, and I would like to congratulate Ducati for this whole idea. So you guys may go to Ducati website, and there you have it. Good luck to you playing with it, and please don't forget to start testing it a few weeks before getting your new bike. Not to screw everything up on the first day if you don't practice before. And I hope you guys found this video useful. If you can get a new Multistrada V4, then you're a lucky man, and I am super happy for you. And now you may also want to check my comparison of this Multistrada V4 and BMW S1000XR, as they are often being compared. The link is there in the description. So see you in the next one.